Okay, we should be up through my stream now.
Is it the same link?
What is going on there?
Should be.
Yeah, and where are you streaming?
Should be going to YouTube.
Metamedia?
Yeah.
Perfect.
I don't know if I titled it nicely.
I hope yesterday's recording is fine.
Oof. No, that's the mess. Okay.
Is the streaming working yet?
It should be.
Yeah,
We
it's live.
restream.
It's just called the Spicy Take.
Oh, is that interesting? Update titles. There we go. Maybe that's it.
Yeah, I'll rename it.
Cool.
Where it is?
Cool. Otherwise, yeah, Yeller, if you want to keep wrangling Ross, I'll just go ahead and get rolling so people aren't sitting here.
Everyone ping Ross.
Everyone ping Ross.
Literally everyone.
This is our like group
I feel like
chill.
20 pings.
Here's Ross's phone
Yeah.
number. Everyone send him a text. Cool. Otherwise, yeah, I will just get rolling. If you want to pull up the stream, I've got some low weight slides to kind of run through everything. If you're here, you've most likely already seen this one. Cool.
You should probably take the next 60 seconds to practice your alternate voice.
My Elmo voice. I could do it as Cartman.
Your alternate voice, whatever you want to do.
Brilliant.
Yeah, you need a lot of practice.
That one hurts. Yeah. I'm trying to think of other voices that I'm half competent at doing. Maybe Morty. I don't know, man. I'm working up some anxiety here.
There you go. That's
Yeah.
a good one.
That's good.
It's just a problem with the legal engineering. Anyway, so here's kind of like a rough layout of what we hope to hit here. My intent with these things is always to get to the questions/open hack piece as quickly as possible. So we'll try to mow through the intros, demos, etc., and really get to, taking your questions. There's Ross. What's up, my dude?
We got him. Woohoo.
Word. Yeah, so I think the first move for us here is to, give a quick introduction of the concept of legal engineering, just for context on what Juris is and what LexDAO are, what Juris and LexDAO are, and ultimately then we'll get to what's a legal wrapper and how it fits to all the DAO stuff and all that kind of stuff. So. Cool. So first question really is, what's legal engineering? Broadly, it's not really a new concept. A lot of different people have taken on sort of the place where technology intersects with the law. In the context where we're talking about it, it gets to this space, which is a thing that comes up in the crypto context a bunch. I think this sort of code is law is code conversation. And really, for the legal engineer, the law is, and even for the lawyer, the law is code already. I've pulled up this picture here so you can see the books. Like the grand compendium of all of the United States laws, literally called the United States Code. Like, these are the books. That's what they look like. They say United States Code on them. And so, lawyers already think like coders. They already think in sort of mechanical and systematic processes the way that programmers do. They just don't realize it. And so with legal engineering, we're very much trying to create a world where we can move from this, which is kind of what currently exists, lawyers, and I say and such because it's really not limited to lawyers. It's easier to say lawyers. And then you have programmers, and there's kind of like this little overlap in the middle right now. You have your legal minds and your programmers, and then you kind of have what we're trying to do, which is blow up this center spot, legal engineers, into a space that is somewhere between that legal knowledge or knowledge, just a mind that understands how the legal world works, how the business world works, all that kind of stuff. And then the fact that, particularly with Web3, we're increasingly able to automate the transactional piece. And that gets us to thinking more like a programmer. And we believe at LexDAO and Juris that there's sort of this emergent middle section where we want to grow that middle piece, because the reality of where lawyers fit into the world right now is the lawyers can't meet demand. People need help making sure that their things are done legally at a much greater volume than lawyers are able to provide it. And they're sort of still stubbornly holding on to the idea that lawyers are the only ones who can help. And I think more broadly with LexDAO and Juris, our answer is that's not really true, but I don't think the people go anywhere. And so really that's sort of the notion of legal engineering and the idea of how it then applies to our world, where I think in this talk will be a little more Web3 heavy, since that's, the audience here. But ultimately, LexDAO and Juris are here to define legal engineer. I think the notion of legal engineering has existed for a while. We want to create and co-opt the sort of position of legal engineer. So people that understand programming and like the law have a place to work on this stuff, even though they're not lawyers. And similarly, lawyers who understand this stuff, like me, I'm trained as a lawyer, but I don't practice. I'm not licensed. And I'm currently locked out of the system. And so really we're here to define ultimately what legal engineering is through conversations with, the people that are interested interested in the seam, where technology hits the sort of practical aspect of, the law is there and is going to come yell at you if you break it, whether you believe in it or not. So, and then that gets us to LexDAO, where I'll throw it to Ross to just do sort of an intro on where LexDAO fits in this. And then after that, I'll talk a little bit about my specific project, Juris. And then from there, we'll move into the demos.
And the fantastic introduction to the topic, Adam. And sorry, I was running a little bit late, but it seems like you had everything, well under control. Great slides. LexDAO is, broadly a sort of digital bar association. A lot of lawyers, when they join the profession, they have to join things called bars, and it's usually just sort of a cartel or kind of a primitive DAO of other lawyers who say who gets to call themselves a lawyer or not. And kind of what Adam is saying with this sort of new field of legal engineering, where we see sort of the collision of value add of making outcomes more predictable, laying out code to execute transactions for financial transfers, and also laying out legal agreements for people to do what they're supposed to do. There's this new kind of way to do lawyering that looks a lot like coding. And my thought was, people who do this work are going to get a lot of FUD. They're going to get a lot of heartburn from other practitioners, from coders, and other lawyers. So LexDAO, at the most basic, is a sort of cooperative that brings together a lot of people that are interested in the subject and have sort of skills that can then turn into products, and then also kind of co-op and define this area of legal engineering. In terms of products, when you think of a digital bar association, it stands very, competitively to make judgments. And I think there is a need for judgments on, digital, bills such as, escrows between DAOs, even DAOs themselves, when they make rulemaking, they might want to have a court system or dispute resolution. So we've been, following what Aragon Court and Claros have been doing, fantastic stuff. And I think lawyers can kind of join the fray as both sort of, remote workers, pulling levers and, operating DAOs and also acting as arbitrators. But kind of also just joining A&J, joining the Claros pools, and joining this future of work that I see of, lawyers are not just going to be people on phones. They're going to be sort of in the weeds with people, figuring out how to actually, get things done. So that was kind of, a rambling intro, but we got a lot of smart people. We're dog fooding. We have our DAOs, LexDAO Cooperative on Aragon. We're also building upgrades to Moloch DAO. And that might be beyond the scope of this call, but, a lot for lawyers to do. I think we already think like coders, and coders think like lawyers. So let's bring this together into one big happy family. And yeah, that's LexDAO.
Sweet. Yeah, and I would say, LexDAO is much more practically focused on the Web3 aspect. And the way I tend to think about this stuff is that there's sort of there's a spectrum of legal engineering, because there's a lot of what we would call legal engineering that happens in a space that's, I think, sort of boring to people that are excited about Web3 and sort of the transactional automation. And that side is just kind of ways to let people programmatically or sort of through software do more pedestrian things like court filings. And so the reason we even have a LexDAO and a Juris is because there really is kind of this split where, I mean, you guys are familiar with the Web3 world, right? Like, you've lived through how hard it is to get somebody to understand the wallet, and then this is chain, and then like there's a chasm in getting people over that hump of like, yeah, but we got max transactional efficiency over here, right? So I would say, like, my interest in LexDAO is that I think LexDAO is ultimately chasing the like techno-utopian ideal of like as much of this should be dry computer code as possible. That said, this gets us to the other side of my focus with Juris, which is all about sort of the other side of that spectrum. And I've got some slides as I kind of run through it. The way I present Juris, that I think, to this audience will be a little more familiar, but you can imagine is a not the easiest sell on the other side of the spectrum. Always, ultimately, Juris is trying to fix the existing legal system with open source methodology, which to people in Web3 might not sound that new. To people in the traditional legal tech world, that's I have to explain what open source is. But they ultimately they overlap, which is a thing that, I think Web3 and crypto understands already when they talk about, building community first, particularly the sort of metacartel approach. And so ultimately, to be open source means people plus technology. And to speak a little more specifically to my experience with Juris so far, we spent the last 2.5 years. We actually started as a blockchain dispute resolution company. It started with a white paper where I said, okay, I'm going to lay out how we're going to make sure that these agreements are enforceable in the real world, because X, Y, and Z, lawyer and judicial system things sort of need to be in place. We were able to raise a bit of money on the back of that, but as soon as we started to bear down on, okay, what does a product look like, we kind of realized we're not quite there yet, because the transactional volume is just not there yet to support an ecosystem of dispute resolution. And so we backed off to a broader project that was just about trying to build consumer-facing legal services. So, for example, one of our most successful apps is it's called Deposit Letter. It helps people fill out a demand letter to send to their landlord to get their security deposit back. Usually landlords are with, like, 1 out of 4 times when a landlord's withholding your security deposit in the United States, it's being illegally withheld. And the people that know to just point that out in a letter get it back. So we built a widget that helps you fill out that letter and customize it based on the laws in your state, gets it out in the mail, to go to people. And what we realized in the course of doing that is, a lot of 2 years worth of user interviews got us to understanding that it doesn't matter how cheap or easy we make that technology. When people are dealing with legal problems, it's so emotional that they just need people involved. They need somebody to help walk them through that system, even if that's, a law firm, to say, we stand by this piece of software, go ahead and use it. And so when I start to realize, okay, so it's not about building that technology, then the people part starts to amp up even more. And it gets us, and I find that it's, I keep saying what's, like, we need a term for when you've pivoted so many times that you come back around to your original idea. And we're sort of back to the idea of community first. So really, like, it's, and partially my work with LexDAO has helped me get to this, but ultimately, like, the legal engineer is what matters in this, having someone that can help people through these systems. And that sort of lines up with open source. So we think the way to attack that, ultimately, I mean, I don't have to explain to this crowd, open source is about the software being free. And so Juris, what we're really working on is an open document standard, a simple way of handling the human agreement part of this system. So ultimately, we'll run a demo so you can see all this stuff, but it's ultimately a system, or I should say, it also includes an open document library. So associated with that is ultimately the idea that, the way to make the documents should be open, a library that everyone is contributing to should be open. And hopefully, as I continue to lead you, you'll see how this DAOs up pretty effectively. And ultimately, one of the changes we think is due here is ultimately is to shift to a standard where the notion of what is a document in this context is human readable text plus the logic. And this is sort of a bait slide for a technical crowd, because when I say logic, they immediately think, okay, well, that's the smart contract. I mean the other side of it. Like, there's another piece of this, which is what's the logic inherent for the user as they're filling out this agreement. Because when lawyers look at contracts and we want to fight over what a contract means in court, we end up talking about the intent of the people who signed it, right? It's a very human conversation. Well, what did you intend when you signed this document? And one side says one thing and one side says the other thing. Well, there's also ways to encode that intent, and we feel like that should be part of the open document package. So that's ultimately why we kind of started from the other side of, I went, okay, smart contracts will handle the transactional execution and stuff. On the other side, how can we make it just as easy as possible for people to engage in this stuff, understand what they're doing, understand what they're agreeing to, and ultimately even have a software, packet that constitutes the document that includes that logic. Here are the answers I gave to these questions in this conversation with the chatbot included in that document packet, because it's entirely doable. It's just metadata and can be, essentially stored in JSON. And so once you have that sort of software layer, if that's open and that's sort of the protocol layer, then ultimately what Juris is to me is more so the community of legal engineers who would support this standard, and who ideally through a DAO we can incentivize to maintain the standard and keep making it better, keep making it more accessible. In part because I think what we're really trying to chase, at least with Juris, is what in the US at least we call the access to justice crisis, which is, in the United States, only 22% of people that should be talking to a lawyer have access to that, which means effectively like 78% of our population is locked out of the judicial system. And what we've been trying to do for the last 2 years is find a way to build something that can scale to help those people. And I think ultimately the answer is it's a public problem. It's a problem that the US citizenry has with their system of government, which means we either have to fix the government or we have to approach the problem in an open way. And so the idea of even sort of productizing the thing and saying, well, if we make it only $15 instead of the cost of a lawyer, I don't know that scales eventually to the size that we need. And so ultimately that makes it really clear to me that it's a legal engineer community effort that has to be built on just an open backbone. And ultimately that gets me the DAO piece I've already alluded to, which I think community ownership is going to be critical to this as well. And so that's really what the broader vision that we're chasing with Juris. I think we'll have some stuff to announce next month and stuff as we figure out sort of what it looks like to run a DAO for this kind of thing. But that's the quick Juris spiel, kind of what we're up to. Next step in the talk here is the what's a legal wrapper chunk. I think Ross kind of has some stuff to say on that one in terms of what we mean when we say legal wrapper in the, I guess, both the legal context and the code context. But I'll say before that, are there questions, comments? Anybody want to say hello? Whatever. Otherwise, take it away, Ross.
No, sure. And not to mess up the flow, but a legal wrapper, as I understand it and as I use with clients and, with LexDAO fam, is really just kind of the remainder of a contract that's not expressed in code. So a lot of Solidity smart contracts kind of, have a skeleton of a legal agreement. They often name parties to the agreement by Ethereum addresses, accounts. They might specify the value involved in the transaction. And in a lot of ways, it reflects the intent of the parties that, a judge or at least a legal engineer could interpret and figure out, what people wanted to run. A legal wrapper is an efficient way to kind of bolster the intent of the parties. And, for a deal, it can just be a sort of escrow agreement or a buy-sell agreement that, makes sure that if something goes wrong with the code or people don't call the functions as they're supposed to do, that there is predictable recourse in legal courts. Kind of what Adam was getting to is that, regardless of what we think about the law, it is an adverse threat to code and, deal operation, because people can always say, I know we agreed to something, but I'm going to sue you and I'm going to tell my story and we'll see what happens. So it's always nice to have a record of your shared story. That's not only an Etherscan transaction, that is very easy to parse. And a lot of, what we do at, LexDAO and Juris and, people in our community is we think, what is the cheapest, most efficient way to go from a sort of Ethereum transaction, which I think is sort of the future of peer-to-peer and people getting shit done together online, and also eliminating the sort of, persistent risk of adverse legal outcomes. Because, as long as we have a court system, as long as we have, so many lawyers in the world, they're going to find issues, and they're also going to promote people in blockchain deals to sort of, go back on their word. So, on the deal perspective, a legal wrapper is really just sort of side-by-side reflection of the code. It is a sort of remainder statement where the code can't fully express what's supposed to happen. And for DAOs and for digital organizations, I think legal wrappers are similarly helpful. Like I said, it's a way to sort of have a private agreement on top of code. For a DAO, I see it as a sort of, operating agreement by code that you can also say, here's a sort of membership or LLC agreement. Make sure that people, have recourse if they get kicked out of the DAO, or we also, as DAO members, have a plan of dissolution and how to, slash people if they don't cooperate, by our terms that might not be fully reflected in an Aragon template or in the Moloch DAO Solidity. So, legal wrappers are just a tool, the trade that I think legal engineers are very familiar with, because we see sort of shortcomings in Solidity code as it is. We don't see it as fully accommodating deals and the sort of outcomes people want. So a dual approach of here's Solidity code that's a really good contract, and then here's some mushy language that allows people to understand what you're trying to do is sort of, for me, a rational thing to do, especially because we're moving money. Why not eliminate risks if we can? And it's awful to get sued for something that you thought you'd agreed to a different set of terms. So that's kind of legal wrappers in a nutshell.
Yeah.
But we're open sourcing our legal wrappers. What we build with clients, we try to put in repos or in libraries, and it's definitely the future. So
I would add, the reality of, and this is the place where lawyers' world is like coders, which is, there are a lot of existing tools for articulating these human agreements. That's kind of the law in a nutshell. But when you think about DAOs and legal wrappers and stuff, we're talking more about business relationships, right? A bunch of people pooling their money together to chase a common goal is not really a new thing. And the law has centuries of nuance to how we can parse those agreements. And no lawyer wants to admit it, but they largely exist as templates. And so when we say legal wrappers for DAOs and things like that, like we just mean like we need to align those two universes of templates. And then all of this, not all, because there are always going to be sort of charlatans and scenesters, whatever you want to call it, scamming it up. But like, you know, a good bit of the well-meaning mistakes that are made when it comes to DAO things are stuff where it's just like, oh man, 2 pages of like meat space human words in the right structure would have made that legal and you would have been fine. I love it when Ross talks about them like spells. You know, like the underlying skill set of a lawyer is doing the research to recognize which spell to use and then literally just saying the right words. And sometimes they're even like weird Latin words that no one understands, and it really sounds like Harry Potter or some shit.
So local.
Anyway, so ultimately that's kind of what we mean by legal wrappers. And the thing that I think Juris and then LexDAO are working on either side of the spectrum is what does it look like Ross said, to have that, you know, make that as easy to deploy on some level as it is to just say, bam, I got a smart contract that represents a DAO. Click, click, click. And so that's, you know, ultimately what we're targeting sort of with the talk here and all that kind of stuff. Cool. So for the next slot, I'd like to introduce Constantine, who is CTO at Juris, who will do kind of a rundown of what we've got with the Juris software thus far, and you know, can jam a little on where we're going with it and stuff like that. I'm gonna kill my stream here, or I guess you can just select Constantine's, right? Let me know if there's a jam up on.
Yeah, let's see how this works. Good morning, everybody. My name's Constantine, CTO of Juris. As Adam said, it's been kind of a long journey to get to where we are today, where we're really embracing the concept of open source, especially for the legal space, in large part because of the things that Adam said, which is that at the end of the day, you know, who owns access to the rights that our legal code bestows upon its citizens? And the answer is nobody. The citizens own the rights. And so if we put up these paywalls and things behind people being able to exercise their rights, people being able to say the right thing, say in the case of the security deposit letter, you know, just because some people know to write a letter, does that mean that they should get their money back versus people who don't know that they need to write a letter, even though to them probably the amount of money that's being withheld is a massive, disproportionately larger part of their net worth, if you will. And we just felt that that was a really unfair thing, especially given that landlord-tenants are one of the most common relationships that exists, one of the most common contracts that exists, and one of the biggest disparities in knowledge between of what legal rights each side has between the landlord and the tenant. The landlord is doing, you know, many different leases, and tenants frequently will have in the single digits of number of leases that they sign in their lifetime. And so because of that, they don't know their rights, you know, and if nobody ever told them that, hey, you know, there are conditions under which you can get your security deposit back, they'll just assume that they're at the whims of somebody's, you know, waking up on the right side of the bed and feeling generous or not. And so it really got us to this idea of like, okay, we need to build a kind of a toolkit that is as easy to use and as little overhead as possible, so that it can be a standard that is easy to replicate and very easy to adopt and even understand. And so kind of what Adam was talking about, the standard, and I'll show you guys it actually in action here in a second, but it's very legible. And so, for example, one of the main things that we want to make sure we capture is kind of what Adam's talking about, the spirit of the agreement. And the spirit of the agreement doesn't just come out in the text of a contract or the text of a letter. it comes out in, well, what prompts was this individual given? Like what, like a lawyer might go and ask individual some questions in an interview about their situation, and they could write whatever they want in that letter, knowing that that individual isn't going to read it. So what questions and what that individual is led to believe, and the spirit of the agreement that they struck or the letter that they wrote is equally as important as the actual legal document that is being mailed, whether it's a demand letter or a contract that's being signed or a registration that's being sent into a state or some other kind of agency. So what we kind of put together is really the idea that both the interview, the assembly of any kind of legal action, what questions are being asked, what data is being collected, how's it being collected, needs to be kind of codified and trackable and auditable the same way that the legal document, the template that's used, and what's the final manifestation of it is. And so what I have pulled up now, by the way, can you all just give me a thumbs up that you can see my screen? I know I'm on the Discord right now, but
We can't see if you're sharing a screen. We can just see your face.
I am sharing it. Is it visible on
I can see it.
the stream?
Wait. Okay.
Yeah, you're good.
There we go.
Okay, cool. I'm just showing a GitHub page right now.
Yep.
So that's what you're saying. Okay, cool.
No, we see it. It's cool.
Yep.
So just to kind of give you an idea, so I want to really dispel this idea that like things are really, look like code. I mean, they are written in a particular format, but this is kind of the format in which the standard we're developing right now poses the interview. And is it okay if I use the kind of LexDAO interview, LexDAO agreement interview as the demo here? Is that okay, or should I pull up another one?
The crypto comics one?
Yep.
Yeah, let's use that one.
Okay.
Or we
cool.
could use the LexDAO terms of service. That's a good example of how that one works into. No, let's do crypto. Let's do the.
I have it open here. It's a very
Okay,
simple one.
cool.
This is more or less a registration type form. But the important thing to notice here is that this is where all the questions that are asked, whether they're required, and kind of all the text an individual who is particular coming in here and using this like legal application, if you will. This legal application registers a organization, essentially. I'm not going to go into the details of what that means, but you can extrapolate that to registering an LLC or registering some other elements. So there's some collection of information that's happens. And so this is all the information that's given. And what's cool is because it is in this kind of very transparent format, it's immediately legible. It's really legible without a lot of kind of a need for technical knowledge. It's in a JSON format, which is a very universal format that's used across multiple different programming languages, even things like that. So it's very versatile. And anybody can go in and read and be like, oh, okay, these are the questions that were asked. And now I can go and also look at the template and also see pretty easily, without even really understanding like any elements of code, like here's the template and here are the parts that are going to be replaced by whatever's in the interview. So I kind of wanted to start from this because I really wanted to kind of hit the point that it's possible to make a standard that is auditable the way that kind of code is, and also legible to humans. And then using these two pieces, so this is the kind of final template of this registration or this constitution that's going to be customized and then could be sent to state of Wyoming or whatever. These could be bylaws, these could be state LLC registrations. But between these two documents, we can now put together a legal application that's versatile, that's secure, and that can be almost embedded anywhere that a user can use. And I'll show you a demo here. So let me see, do I have it pulled up? Okay, cool. So this is kind of my preview of it. That's very simple. So you can see here are the 4 questions that were laid out here. It's just that now if you were to embed this in a website, it might actually look something more like this, where you're hiding the preview. I'm just showing it this way. This is a kind of debugging interface that we have so that you can see the PDF be constructed that would then be sent over to the state, printed out or emailed, whatever it is that you want to do. This is just a preview screen so that you can see it built in real time. If you were to create this application and serve it to your clients, make it available online, whatever it is, it might just look something like this, where it just dumps you right into the interview. And so in this context, let's say we start filling this out. So I'll just fill it out as Juris. What you'll see is the document immediately updates. And now this is actually a live PDF that's being rebuilt every single time that we're adding values. And you'll notice a couple of things. Obviously, those values are now being filled in with the value that I have here, to revolutionize legal tech. Here we go. It's a little early to spell. So now this is being kind of filled out here, and you can see, and this is literally, this is a PDF. This isn't a preview of a PDF. This is literally a PDF that you could go and download. And then there's a couple other things that you'll notice that we think are really important, again, from this context of auditability, of making sure that both the spirit of a document, an agreement, a letter, as well as the actual content of those documents are captured and can be analyzed and verified at any point in time. What we're also doing is you'll see up here, there's kind of a few hashes, and then also this little robot guy that changes every single time. I do real estate investing, and one of the things that drives me crazy is when we go for a closing and there's so much absurd amounts of paperwork, and I'm like, there's no way that I can fully verify that like all these documents are the same as the documents that were emailed me to preview, which pages go with which documents and pages. It's kind of a
also
nightmare.
Already reviewed them via DocuSign usually, and so they look familiar.
Yeah. They look
but you're
familiar.
Putting a wet signature on a different thing. Yeah.
You have no idea. You have no idea. And I know that this is kind of like, I haven't had any issues yet in real estate investing, but as we talk about kind of the idea of using more and more digital documents, the idea of manipulation, nefarious manipulation in transit becomes more and more possible. And so we need to have, a lot of ways to be able to verify, the source of truth, if you will, a term that's often used in crypto communities. But what is the source of truth, and how can we quickly verify that the contents of a document, a smart contract, whatever is the same as in another instance? And so what we're doing here is we got a couple of different pieces. We got obviously like the template and the questionnaire. Those two items are important, and we need to make sure that nobody goes and changes like what the questionnaire was after somebody took it. We need to be able to kind of like lock versions on it. Something that's really cool is that in the coding community, developers have solved that problem a long time ago. Version control has been around for 50 years. It's one of the most, I think, undervalued technologies that most people don't know about. And yet our entire lives are only made possible because of version control. All the major apps and everything that we use that's technical on our computers, on our phones, are only possible because of version control. It's akin to the printing press, in my opinion. And it's something that we have talked a lot about, is very useful in the legal space, in large part because, as Adam set up, it is code. It's called legal code. It is code. We want to make sure that we're operating by the code that everyone agreed upon. And so what we're doing on these documents in the moment is we're doing kind of two hashes up here. And these hashes are a very useful tool in the developer realm, which allows you to take a big document, lots of data, and you run it through a function that basically spits out like another certain number of characters hash, what's called, and it's just kind of like a string of digits. But what happens is, because of the way that function kind of calculates that hash, if there's just like one word or one letter or one character changed in that original document, in that original file, that hash would come out completely different. And so it is used in software, for example, to ensure that when you download a piece of software from online, from a website, that when you go and you run it and install it, it's going to go check the hash of that package that you download, that file that you download, against what the developer has published on their site as being the official hash of that package. Meaning that if they match, there was no manipulation that happened in transit, because that is something that can happen. You know, somebody could intercept that package, change it, and then suddenly you have a vulnerability on your computer. So it's used to ensure that our computers and our networks and systems and everything like that are kept safe and
using
for
the right
cybersecurity
document.
purposes.
Yeah, and I would say, you know, like for this audience, you guys will understand a lot of this stuff. We played with things like just take a PDF and put it on IPFS, and even like trying to figure out the ratification process for LexDAO's constitution ultimately was this weird thing of going, okay, but then document has to go up and whatever. And I mean, the answer is there needs to be a document level reference for this editing situation, right? And then you can output a PDF of that. You put it on IPFS. It layers up like crazy when you talk about tracing the verifiability of the document. But ultimately, this hash thing is a solution we literally built in the last week because of the experience of executing LexDAO's constitution and ratifying it via vote and having this weird conversation about like, right, but how do I know that you uploaded the right way? You know, like it was, anyway. Yeah.
And we all know that, especially if we're using Word or any kind of these long documents, like typos happen and version swaps happen. Like this stuff happens. And so we want to be able to have the best system for it. And so that's what these hashes do. There's kind of two hashes that we implemented here. A template hash, which just verifies that it's a unique hash for the template that's used for the contract and then the interview. So it takes those two things, those two documents, and it compiles them. So if you have another document that looks very similar, but that template hash is different, then you know either the text template or the interview was different on this other document than the other one. And so you know that you probably need to do a little more digging to find out if the spirit of the document or the text of the document is different. And then there's also the document hash, and the document hash incorporates also the answers to these questions. This is really about identifying like, hey, you know, is this page, you know, and we've embedded these hashes on every single page, is this page actually from this series of documents, right? Because how many times do you have documents that are 10 pages long and a signature only exists on page 10? Well, how do you know that those first 9 documents are actually from there and haven't been manipulated? Again, in the meat space, we kind of take it for granted that doesn't happen, though it's happened. But in the digital space, it is much easier for nefarious actors to set up ways of doing it systematically, and therefore we kind of need to be able to address it. And then the other thing that we've just done here, it's kind of like cute, but you can understand how visually it's valuable, is we've taken that document hash and we've done what's called like a robo hash. And what it is it's just basically a visual representation of that hash that for us as humans, we deal much better at with colors, shapes, especially different types of faces and things like that. So if we wanted to quickly take a 30-page document and validate and know for a fact that every single page is from that instance of the document, the easiest way for us would be to look at this little icon or some kind of visual representation rather than look at the document hash of every single one and try to compare, 30 pages, 30 different hashes together. The image is much quicker. And so, this is 0x whatever. Organization token.
The robot changed.
Sure. Yeah. So now you can see as I change
robot changed again.
as I change these values, the document hash changes, the robot changes, the template hash stays the same though, because we're still using the same template. So as we've completed this interview, this preview again kind of is there to show you how the PDF is generated in real time. I can do everything with a PDF now that I can do in any other case. I can go print it, I can go download it, I can go send it to an API that mails it. I can do anything that I want with it. But the cool thing that's happened here, and that's really taking a lot from the decentralized application space, is that nothing has left my computer.
That's what I was
everything
say.
has been done entirely in my computer.
Yeah,
exactly. Nothing has been transmitted to any server. None of this has been in a position where anybody could intercept it. And so we really decided to go that route because a lot of the solutions that we're seeing out there for document assembly required, hosting servers, and then that means you've got to protect the transfer of those files to and from the server. And really what we saw was the opportunity to create a package that anybody could implement and use that would already dictate a security for the end users just because of its architecture.
Look,
And
it's
so
just
this, you
partially
can see how
selfish.
it
I don't want to host social security numbers on a server. It's a security liability for me as an operator. And we can solve that problem. So we built it.
Exactly. And so what I've been working on now, this is like, for me, a test interview here. But what I've just been working on now is this next kind of step of like, okay, cool. What do you want to do with this file? You've created this PDF. What do you want to do with it? And so, you can just go download it, do whatever you want with it. You can go email it out to a client or an individual. And then I'm building out this ability to, hey, pay a fee and have it be put into the mail or certified or something. And then that way you could file, your Wyoming LLC registration.
But you can
directly
imagine
like
as from a technical standpoint, it's all client side. So the PDF is just sitting there in the browser, right? I mean, you can send it anywhere you want with a fairly simple plugin. You want to show off the builder real quick?
Yeah. So you can kind of see it here. So this is some of our kind of debug tools that we've created. So we've been using a few really cool libraries. So the interview builder is powered by a library called Survey.js, and you can see they licensed their builder. We're not licensing it right now because
they're open source, so we're not charging for it, so we're allowed to use it, right? That's my understanding.
Yeah, I mean, so I think this is actually over complex. This is a part that needs to be replaced. So they also power this kind of interview that you can see here. So this whole thing that, you would imagine a SurveyMonkey or a Typeform or any kind of like form generating thing, service generating something like this. This is an open source, a very robust open source library that manages all of that. And what's really cool about it is that it incorporates just a lot of the different things that you would need to do. So this is their kind of builder. So this, you can see here, is the interview that we just completed. And we can add things such as, uploads of images, or it even has the ability to add a signature. We haven't incorporated that to be able to place that signature in the PDF yet. That's just on our short list of items to do. But it has all these options right out of the box, including things like logic. So, being able to show only the correct questions to them, having these questions being groups across multiple different pages. All of these things are just operational here right outside the box, and it's really extremely robust. And so the way that we see in terms of our roadmap moving forward is to contextualize this builder to really the legal space. And the reason we're kind of starting with this builder and this library is because they're really, from the research that we've done, have the most comprehensive set of logic tools and data collection kind of interfaces of any other library out there. And it's open source. It's something that everybody can understand. And like I said, this is kind of all that builder does is generate this file. So if I were to go here and I were to add a new, I'm going to add a new input here, another question. What it's going to do, let's save it here real fast.
Barada, I don't think we've gotten to autosave yet.
No, we haven't. No, but you can see that all it's doing, this is the JSON editor. You can see like this is what it's generating. Here's that other question. You can see this looks exactly the same as this, which we're now hosting on GitHub under version control. So here it is. It's just generating this, and this is just a user interface to do that. And I think this user interface, in a lot of ways, is a little bit overkill for a lot of legal applications and not as contextualized fully. There's a lot of things in here, you know, bar rating or like these matrix things that are just a little too techy, but we're kind of like, you know, making it so that everything is possible and then scaling it down to what is useful and applicable to the legal tech space. And then you can see that, you know, here's our document template. I showed you that before. That's exactly what we're version controlling on GitHub. And then, you know, we've got, what's really cool is right out of the box, you could actually go and create an interview, host it on GitHub, and put in the raw URLs of that interview file and the output file, and already go ahead and basically embed it on your own website. We have like an iframe here that you can go and embed on your website, and people can start using it. What's additionally cool is already, like, if you embed that iframe and you have a little bit of coding experience, you can also say send PDF to parent document, and what it'll do is it'll actually spit out that finished PDF to whatever is the parent page that is hosting it through this code, and it will then allow you to do whatever you want with that PDF. So if you wanted to incorporate this into like a website that has, you know, is behind a login or something like that, you could do that, and you would completely manage it, because the PDF, once it's completed by our builder, it's passed off to the front end of your website. So it never even leaves the client's computer. And it just generates that and then sends it to your website. You do whatever you want. You want to upload it to an S3 bucket, that's cool. But at that point, you know, the builder is like, our little embed iframe is done. You can, you know, send people that link, that kind of thing. So what we really wanted to do is to build something that was infinitely flexible and useful as quickly as possible out of the box, without any real coding involved, aside from just understanding how to use this kind of interview builder, which is, you know, just a WYSIWYG, a very simple WYSIWYG, and being able to put together a pretty simple handlebars, like these little this templating language is called handlebars because of these curvy brackets. But this is something that anybody can do. You don't have to be a very sophisticated coder to be able to address it. And you just write it in Markdown and it'll generate that PDF. And so in that regard, it is just infinitely flexible. It can incorporate with anybody's already legal practice immediately, without any kind of server, without basically any overhead costs, except for the time you put in to create this template.
And ultimately, you know, so
And
go ahead.
oh, I was just gonna say, yeah. And so for the record, I did one of these. So if I can do it, you can do it. That being said, I built it off of the LexDAO kind of template that they had, but I ported that into this, put in the little stuff, and then, you know, got a little template for a cooperative DAO type thing. So it's really easy if you have like a standard kind of legal wrapper. If you want to put that into context, that makes it easy for people to spin up their own for their DAO. It's really easy to do that. So I can figure it out. So you probably can too. So it's really nice. That's just like set it up like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, again, the disclaimer is that it is like early stage. And so like, as we kind of develop and put more time on it, it quickly gets easier and easier. And kind of our one of the other big features on our short list is to just have it immediately connect to your GitHub repo, where you can keep all of your templates and be able to kind of pull those in, so you can work on them on that site, builder.getjuris.com, and be able to immediately save them to your GitHub. And I wanted to point out one other thing before I kind of turn it over, since I know I've kind of run a little bit long, which is that you'll notice here at the bottom of the PDF another really important thing, which is that we want to make sure that we know which interview files we're working off of. And what you'll see down here is that it actually stores the URL of the template in the interview here. And what's great about GitHub is every single commit that you put in there, it's never deleted. So If I go into here, I believe I can go here to latest commit and browse the files. When I link it to these individual files, these will never change, because I think one of the important things is that with these hashes, you want to make sure that, again, nobody went in and changed the file at this URL. And so what you can do is, if you use here, I'm going to just change this interview file here. You can see there's this hash. This hash denotes a specific commit. So this file will never change. As people go in, as the owner of this template goes in and modifies the interview and makes new commits, it'll be attached to a different stage of the project. And so when you have this specific URL written in here, you know that you can always go back and pull back from version control the exact interview and the exact template file that was used by that specific instance of the document that was generated, which we found was really important, because as we developed our security deposit letter and even things like that, we evolved it, we made the language stronger, we changed it for different states and things like that. And what we found was, when clients came back to us and were like, hey, wrote the letter a few weeks ago, wondering what I should do now, we needed to go back and we needed to know exactly which version that they used to generate that, because they had essentially instantiated a program by sending that letter. And we needed to make sure that our own personal developments, our continuous integration development, for example, didn't interfere with our ability to then go back and audit what happened with that particular individual. And so all of these things are built in right out of the box into this completely front-end package that requires basically zero infrastructure costs in order to use and implement anywhere. And so we really decided that this needed to be the philosophy of what we put out there, because this was the way that you could actually build apps that actually solve the problem of legal justice and access to justice without putting it behind a paywall.
Yeah, I would say, I think the last piece is...
Oh, go ahead.
Just regarding version control. I mean, really, we don't need to reinvent that wheel, was our answer, right? I mean, I think there are a lot of interesting ways you can think of using version control in the sort of legal document context, but really, like, same deal. We were trying to go simple as possible, open source. The standard, as I sort of described it before, is literally a markdown file and a JSON file, and we think everybody should just keep them on GitHub until there's a better answer, or unless you have another answer. And I think part of our quest is going to be getting the non-developer subset, the lawyers, to understand how version control works, because that's what makes open source work ultimately.
And you can store a Git repository on IPFS,
Serverless.
So like the point, yeah, the point is when you put in the standard, the Git standard, which is just so robust at this point, you can choose where to store it. Obviously, with GitHub servers, you're trusting Microsoft. So
yeah, different game.
Another thing, well, if you have the hash, right, you can always content address the doc. So wherever the doc lives, you can always say, if it hashes to this thing, it's the doc. So then you could have this library of legal templates created by the community, and then you can have some of them actually reviewed by lawyers or legal engineers to say, hey, this one's legit, and they can say this hash of this doc is the legit version. Just like we audit code for Solidity contracts, we can also audit the code for legal contracts. And you can say, hey, if you're using this hash for this contract on the legal side with this hash for this DAO template on the DAO side, these things match up and they've been audited. So that's kind of a cool thing you can do due to that content addressing and version control.
So I feel like we've run long on this segment, but I'm the host, so I guess I get to do that. So ultimately, we have this standard. If you're interested in helping develop it, if you're interested in being part of the community, it's sort of ongoing conversation here, adopting the standard, in part figuring out what the WarCamp looks like to make this thing a DAO, because I believe that community ownership is the way to handle this public problem responsibly. I'll share the Discord server in the chat. You can jump in over there. In terms of the agenda, at this point, the plan was to move to LexDAO, where you can see, how you could catch what comes out of Juris and get it into a smart contract almost trivially, I think. Or at least Ross can speak on it. I don't know if you want to, if you're intending to run through Solidity. At this point, what is the...
We're over long, but...
Yeah.
Yeah. So LexDAO, as you hinted, is more the Web3 part of the equation, and thinking about how can we take doc automation parts, how can we take raw legal text and also make it interact with assets on Ethereum or wherever else they want to live online. And yeah, LexDAO is basically really keyed into that problem of a lot of value is locked in paper contracts and also paper organizations, and how do we get that value be backwards compatible and speak to where people actually live, which is places like Discord, Telegram, and basically all of our lives are online, and we expect things to be 24/7. We don't like banks going on holidays or closing. We also don't like lawyers saying, oh, call me in the morning. So real-time law, real-time financials is kind of the LexDAO research focus. And yeah, we're going to build off what Adam's working on, what Metacartel's building, and just make it easy to never have to talk to a lawyer again, but still have the benefits. So yeah, but yeah, smart contracts all the way. I see that as maybe we're not going to talk about smart contracts or paper contracts. It's all Ethereum contracts are contracts, and that's basically the future of rulemaking. If any of this is interesting to you guys, philosophically or practically, because you're a coder and you have legal problems and you just don't like lawyers, join our fray, join the cause. And also, we're always recruiting, legal associates to become, legal engineering apprentices and help us learn Solidity and, build related protocols. So we're, wide open. LexDAO.chat is the Discord. LexDAO.org is, I guess, our sort of, website landing page. Come check us out. Great stuff, Adam.
I'll put everything in the chat after this as well. And also, I just shared on the screen an example of sort of this stuff working together. This is LexDAO's personal token factory that we built, where we standardized some values around the idea of how a personal token would operate from our perspective as to scholars, I suppose. And then we're also using Juris, the Juris standard to, to actually generate the terms of service associated with the token, upload it to IPFS. Am I missing anything else? It generates the PDF, it uploads it to IPFS, it writes the hash to the chain. And if you want to poke around in there, I mean, the code's open there too, so you can take a look at how that's working. You unmuted. Anything to say on that, Ross?
Oh, no, yeah, you got it right. So, yeah, there is the IPFS legal text, but also the link to that IPFS location and the token itself, what we call a stamp. And that's something we think about a lot at LexDAO is, basically how can we just add more context to these digital assets? And if that context is an IPFS hash to a, full, stack of papers, great. As long as it's easy to find, no problem there. So, yeah.
It also has dispute resolution built in. So
So
if you have a fight over your tokens, you can come to LexDAO, and as a DAO, will adjudicate the dispute.
The simplest use case of DAOs is an arbitration panel of just like, here's some lawyers who are going to vote and then unlock your assets, and it'll be instantaneous. But yeah, we're pretty hype on that. So definitely that's the future of assets through LexDAO, the Juris protocol. We've really hammered out a way to create legal paperwork associated with things people are doing on Ethereum, as well as, legal services and judgment services who, if something goes wrong, you're not going to just go to court. You're just going to talk to a DAO, and that's it. Yeah.
How do you connect like the document to the token? So,
a hash reference. So basically, kind of what Adam says is that a lot of the way we settle disputes and get to a sort of understanding of the world of assets is like, okay, what do people actually want to do here? When you create an Ethereum asset like a token, you can add a bunch of input data associated with creating that asset and the person signing the transaction, to actually, bring it into being, including the sort of signed PDF location is a helpful way to say, yep, there was an intent to sort of create a right or some other sort of recourse. It's not just any other token. So yeah, it's basically, the idea of legal wrappers is to add context so that other powers that be can sort of operate more predictably. And power that be here is the legal layer that sits on every individual in this world, whether we like it or not. But yeah, just passing the context hash reference into the token. Yeah.
So I'm guessing it's kind of like the 1400 standard where you have like some sort of document thing and you can just pump in hashes. And so you say,
Oh yeah,
we
yeah,
use
totally.
this question, we use this template, we use this document.
Yeah.
Just
I think a lot of lawyers make it overcomplicated. Yeah, it's straight up just a data location and adding another field to an asset so that people can look it up and understand what sort of rights are attached or what promises are being made about the balances of that asset. And yeah, we actually have an implementation of 1404, which is the token off security token standard, the only security token that's actually passed muster for a SEC registration. And yeah, we include data stamps, and also the whitelisting scheme uses our DAO. So we've kind of at least handled that aspect of, any sort of equity or other regulated asset will need some sort of transfer scheme in order to be compliant. And for me, I'd rather DAOs control transfer restriction and compliance schemes rather than just saying like, now a developer team has to go talk to a law firm and then they're going to have a back and forth about what should happen. That seems terribly inefficient and extractive. So we just did away with it. Yeah. Any other questions?
Anything to say, Constantine,
Yeah,
in
I
terms
was.
of the connection between the documents and stuff? I mean, I think on Juris's side, it ends with everything is still just there on the client side, so you can catch it all manner of ways. Webhooks? What do you want to? How do you want to do it?
Yeah, I mean that's how where hashing, comes in, and you just figure out the best way to use that. At the end of the day, there's kind of the question of storage, of document storage, and the way it's been solved in kind of meat space world is still like, you have a copy, they have a copy, you execute both, and then you duel it out in court over the fact that your copy is the authentic one if it's different from the other one, and so hashing kind of solves that, where you can store it on IPFS, but ultimately the best thing is, in addition to that, for all the parties involved to have copies of the document that you can verify through whatever kind of hash is the definitive truth, and whether that be a document hash, whether that be a template hash, whether it be a combination of those, whether it be, I think IPFS address is not enough, because that requires that it stays up there. So it needs to be something that references just the content of the document as well. And the IPFS hash is kind of secondary and a bonus.
Rock on.
I have a question.
Please.
I think this is really cool, folks. I was just kind of curious if you had like a read on like how you were talking about lawyers have a tough time with like open source technology and like kind of what you guys are working on. Do you have like a read on like the people in like the judicial world like accepting cryptography signing as like a general form of agreements and stuff? I'm thinking more like extending it into like the like civil dispute kind of world, or even like with folks that are facing crime issues and stuff. But I don't know if it's going to be a hard sell to kind of get this platform like more widely adopted, or if it's like kind of coming around.
Yeah, I think part of that comes down to like any governmental system ultimately comes down to if you can get enough people together who all then go to the judges and say, yeah, this is why you should trust this. Like that's the strongest possible signal. So part of the community effort is, bring in as many people as we can.
Yeah.
But then the reality of the court system is you have your day in court. And so you can always go to the judge and via the process that lawyers use, show why this is a consistent thing, right? I mean, it's a hassle. You got to bring in a cryptography expert, and they have to attest to blah blah blah, and but
Right.
there is a process for it, and that continues to play out in different contexts, particularly as courts become aware of, you can use cell phone tower records to prove location now, so one of the
Right.
first things I would chase if I had a client who was apparently in a place at a time and they're in trouble for it, I would be like, well, did you have your phone on you? Okay, we can go subpoena things to show that you were not in that area if that's what you're telling me is the truth, right?
Right.
And
So
those
it's
things
kind
are
of
all
like having the
encrypted
audible
and,
paper trail.
yeah, so understanding about this stuff is proliferating just because it exists in the world and that's what the legal system is responding to. Which is sort of a way of saying it doesn't matter if they care because it's
Yeah.
there, right? And so on some level it's hard right now still because you have to explain it to the judge. But our thing is and I think this is an ongoing LexDAO conversation, which is just okay, but how would we make that as easy as possible? And so on the jurist side, my whole thing is we just want to make sure you have the right stack of papers. Ultimately, you're gonna have to print it out. You're gonna have to take it to the judge. But we want to make that as simple as possible if it has to happen. And so it's really just, this hash, this thing. Here's a report from an MIT cryptographer that's been cited in other cases. It's that in itself, how you defend it is in itself a template. And so,
Right. So
I
it's
think,
not authoritative, but it tells the story of
yeah, and the more
the
law there is, the
human
more
side of
people
the
that make the argument and then a decision gets made, that the more things I can put on the stack of I'm going to go cite these 10 cases, in favor of cryptographic records. Signatures get weird because you have to link the ID to the key on some level. And so, this is where it starts to get weird and soupy in the Web3 space because some of these things break if you're anonymous. They just do. And that's why we still like squiggly ink lines made by hand as our signatures because, it's still fairly closely tied to me being able to validate that you're actually the person. Because one way to get out of an agreement is to say, that's not me. That's not my signature. That was forged. And a judge, if you could prove
I
it,
think
would
about
go, yeah, that's
DocuSign.
not you. Get out of here.
Yeah, I think about DocuSign, and it's you log in with some arbitrary OAuth thing, and then you put down the world's worst squiggly into a document, and that's supposed to hold up. But
Right.
if I have my own cryptographic key, how do I tell that narrative that this is mine? But yeah, that makes sense. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, the first way to make that link is to claim it. If you're the only person, that has publicly claimed that address and signed documents containing it, it's pretty good evidence that you control it. But, clearly there are issues there, and it's better if you are able to sign cryptographically with your private key that actually shows you control that public account. Yeah, there's methods to kind of double up and, sign a squiggly and also sign a MetaMask transaction that proves, you control the party to that agreement. So, yeah. We're figuring it out, but I do think it's solvable. And I think attorneys aren't that skeptical of public private key cryptography to sign things. They're probably a bit more skeptical just on the idea of digital assets generally. And I think that's probably just going to be more of a learning curve, but they'll also just be helped by, market changes. So
that's part of why I think DAOs are an important part of the solution because ultimately this when this is the boring part of the legal game, it's just slow growth. You got to change government processes before you have ultimate clarity. And for that, you need thousands, hundreds, millions of people who are talking to the government and saying, we want this. We don't care what your agenda is. Right? So,
yeah, show that you vote. Yeah. But yeah, generally LexDAO is also in the education business, and we're trying to put out articles that explain, in a more legally friendly way how all this stuff works together and is complete. If you guys have any word bugs, or want to join that effort, we welcome those inputs. And it's probably much better not to only have lawyers write those sort of educational articles and file briefs, but to have coders who only think about code sort of join our ranks. So LexDAO isn't lawyers only. Our cooperative of 41 people at the moment is a mix of lawyers and coders, and then within that we sort of have different cells of working groups that are experimenting and might be lawyer only or coder only. But yeah, anyways, it's a big tent, and there's a lot of cool stuff happening, as you can see with Juris. So yeah, I'm
And
excited
we're
about
working
it.
on, I would say we're working on setting up the same at Juris. Even less tech, though. I mean, our goal is, we want it between Juris and LexDAO. I just want to hollow out the legal industry of everything that should not be owned by the monopoly. Anywhere we run into a government form that you could fill out, get in the mail, and you're done with the process, like, let's go eat it.
Yeah, I think there's a massive markup of value that can be squeezed out of all these gatekeepers, and why shouldn't coders get to do that as well as lawyers? So please join.
Otherwise, I think that's the whole thing. Unless people want to have questions, comments, want to jam for the remaining 10 minutes. Thanks for joining us and sticking around. I put up all the links in the workshop chat, but Juris is on Discord, LexDAO is on Discord, so you're already here. That's the place to catch us.
Cool, awesome. Thanks for joining, everyone.
Thank you guys. Really appreciate it. Awesome workshop.
Yeah, totally. Thank you, Adam and Ross.